Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Real Birding Podcast. I'm Will coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina, and this is Caleb coming to you from Grand Rapids, Michigan. We've had a pretty fun week in birding. A rare barnacle goose, and migration is just getting going. So let's get into it.
Will, what's happening, man?
Can't complain, man. It's been a good week. Things are getting busier at work, but it's getting nicer out. So you get out of work and it's not dark and gloomy. So yeah, it's on the up and up.
That sounds good. You had said that you had flowers in bloom and trees blooming and stuff. We definitely do not have that up here.
Yeah, all the invasive Bradford pears are starting to bloom, as well as a lot of trees that I don't necessarily know the name of. Although I do know the magnolias are starting to bloom. Another non-native, but not necessarily an invasive. That's one of the plants for me. People must know about me that I'm a native plant freak. I just love having plants that fit in with our kind of native ecosystem to support insects and support birds and mammals and all that good stuff. But magnolias, I might have to put some in my yard when eventually I do have a yard because they are just spectacular this time of year.
Flowers on those are amazing, right? They're like broadleaf and kind of evergreen, right?
Well, and fun fact about magnolia flowers, the lineage of magnolias is actually so ancient that it predates flowering tree species. So what they have aren't technically flowers. They're missing some essential element of flowers that angiosperms, which is what we call flowering plants, all have. Anyways, that's getting way too into the weeds. Let's talk about birds, dude.
Let's do it. So let's start out with a cool video that I came across here, and just this has always struck me as super cool. So go ahead and check this out.
A bird. Meet the master of disguise in the animal kingdom, the Nyctibidae. It has no real ambitions in life. As a bird, it doesn't dream of flying. From the moment it's born, it sticks to its tree stump. Its biggest wish? To become a tree stump itself. It just stands there, exposed to the wind and rain, hungry all the time, barely getting a meal. It sleeps all day and all night, never opening its eyes because it's always tired. It waits for...
Well, that can't be true.
It's just like if you wrote the script and had the AI read it this way, it's such a bizarre thing to do. It strains credibility that somebody would do that on purpose. And I see these types of things a lot. Some of the times it's funny and it's like accurate or whatever, but just worded like awkwardly. And then other times there's just like blatant issues. Like I saw a video the other day and it had what it was calling a fawn being predated by, I can't remember what predator, but it was actually a baby moose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's somebody that's clearly like finding these clips and like using Google Translate or something, or maybe it's just AI top to bottom and it just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, fun. It is the kind of things that we can nitpick. Yeah, what is this bird? Is it a frogmouth?
So, okay, that's exactly what my first thought was when I heard it, because you're like Nyctibidae. That's the family. It's not the frogmouse, it's the Potoos. And let me switch screens here. So it's not the frogmouse, actually. The ones that aren't they like Australian and Southeast Asia, that New Guinea?
Yeah, right. Indonesia, probably.
Yeah, it's the South American ones, the Potoos or Potoos, depending on how you pronounce it. And I actually have seen these in Colombia and heard them in the Amazon of Ecuador, and man, they are just bizarre looking animals, and normally you don't really see them in the daytime much.
So the only Potoo that I've ever seen was the great Potoo, and I saw it in Costa Rica when I lived there. There was a known one hanging out it was a tree that was on the edge of the rainforest, and it was hanging out right over a restaurant, and the guy that I was birding with there took me there to see it. And when I got on it, I was like, well, that can't be it. This is an owl. This is like a Strix, like barred owl looking thing. And he was like, no, that's it. Because I assumed this bird would be like, I don't know, the size of a whippoorwill. But the great Potoo is actually like closer to barred owl size, which I was completely astonished by.
So that is my photo. I took this in the Amazon of Ecuador in 2004. And this bird was way up in the canopy, but we would have never seen this in 100 years. The guide knew exactly where it was. And I'm with you. The size of it was astonishing because most of these nightjars are like little guys. This thing was a hunk of meat. And it was the same pale gray color as the bark, the branches on these giant. I forget if it was like kapok or what's the one with the fan leaf, Cecropia.
Oh yeah,
I think it was a Cecropia. Oh yeah, you can see the leaves right there.
Yep, there you go.
So that was an amazing bird, and when they're at rest like that, it looks like there's almost no beak on it, and then when they open up the bill, you realize just how gigantic it is.
Yep. Yeah, dude, that family, the goat suckers, is what that family is often referred to, probably because of some outdated tradition or
tail of some sort.
Yeah, but it's crazy how diverse that group is and how widespread it is. When we in North America pretty much only know whippoorwill and chuck-will's widow, at least in Eastern North America.
Right.
Other places could have 5, 6, 7 species all in the same area. They're represented by this family.
Yeah. These are very mysterious. I'm sure people who aren't birders, when they see these, just especially in the tropics, like where it like looks, it stands right on the end of like a fence post, and it looks just like the fence post. And then not only that, that's the nest of it is on the top of a fence post with no material, just like literally lays the egg there and incubates it while pretending to be the end of the post. And then, dude, take a look at the eyelids right here. Do you see those little nicks? There's 2 little nicks in the upper eyelid. The idea of it is the bird is able to see you while it's at rest. Yeah. Okay. So look at the eyelid. There's a nick right there and right there, and the bird can shut the eye and it can still see you.
And so what is a nick? Like a membrane?
I think it's just the shape of the upper eyelid just has a little opening.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were talking about the nictitating membrane.
No.
That's the false eyelid that lots of species have, including many birds.
Right. That's a more of a protective layer, but it's still see-through for the most part. But no, this thing's literally just closing the eye, because if it leaves the eye open, stuff's going to notice it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's really just cool. Phenomenal. We were driving down the road in Costa Rica at one point, and our guide had told us, if you go to this certain place and when you crest the hill, watch the fence post along the right side, there's been a common potoo sitting there with its baby, and it had left like within a few days of right before we got there with the baby. So we did not end up seeing that bird.
Oh, dude, you got to pull up the song of the common potoo. One of the most bizarre sounding birds.
Oh yeah.
Actually, maybe only second to the great potoo. They all make bizarre sounds.
What does the great potoo do? I have not heard that one.
We'll have to pull them both up. They sound nothing alike. Nothing alike. It's one of the most eerie, melodic sounding things, and it's always in the middle of the night when it's pitch black. And if you've ever been in a rainforest at nighttime, it's already dark there in the daytime, and then the sun goes down and it is pitch black, and you just hear that.
It's so haunting already, and then to add that on top of it, I remember sitting in the Amazon at Sani Lodge in Ecuador back in 2004, and the night sky was the blackest night sky I've ever seen. The Milky Way, the stars, everything just shined like you were out, like you were in space, because there was no lights within hundreds of miles of you. And then those were singing in numbers, and common paraki was going, and then just endless frogs, and the ambiance of it all was so powerful. Let's do great Potoo. Whoa. The barn owl.
Isn't that ridiculous?
That is ludicrous. Have you heard that?
No, never. I wish.
How'd you know about it?
I mean, when I was in Costa Rica, I had so much time on my hands. I studied all the sounds of the local birds, even the ones that I would probably never have a chance of hearing. Isn't it like that though? Like, I don't know about you, but like everybody knows the barn owl sound, and I've never heard a barn owl.
Yeah. I've heard them just a couple times.
Yeah.
And their sound a lot, very similar to that, a little bit even uglier, I would say. Barn owl is about the ugliest noise I think I've ever heard.
It's pretty bad. What I always say about barn owl is one time I had Merlin open recording, and I unzipped my backpack, and that zipper sound triggered barn owl in Merlin.
Boy, that's something. Because Merlin is always it's a great tool, but it also gets certain things wrong sometimes. But I don't think I've heard of an inanimate object being called a bird yet. That one's new.
Yeah.
So what's going on bird-wise in North Carolina right now? Are you guys getting migration? What's the vibe? Is it like spring migration?
It's hard to tell. I don't spend enough time out in the countryside, and there's not a lot of habitat here. I can tell you that blackbirds and grackles are here in much higher numbers than they were before. I'm guessing that's probably similar to Michigan, though.
We just got the blackbird invasion 2 days ago, and just happened to not be out that day. We went out 3 days before that on the first south wind, but the birds they called the bluff, and they're like, yeah, we know it's still going to be cold after today, so they hardly flew. I mean, a couple came, but yeah, killdeer came, humongous goose push, the expected kind of early push, like red-winged blackbirds, grackles, cowbirds, that kind of stuff.
So here's one interesting thing that happened this week. So here we have two species of crow. We have American crow and we have fish crow. And if there's any listeners that don't know the difference, don't worry, nobody else does either. Just kidding. No, fish crows. No, fish crows. The main difference is that fish crows sound quite different. They're a lot more nasally, and they've got a couple of kind of classic fish crow calls. But they're common here. They're a little bit less common than American crow, but they really clear out. They really clear out from the city during the winter. And last week I was sitting outside with Becca, and I start hearing just this cacophony of fish crows, and I look up, and there's a flock of, oh gosh, I don't know, 200 fish crows flying over all together and flying very high in a tight ball, making lots of noise. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a good chance this is a migrating group, a migrating flock, or murder, if you will, of fish crows. And I had no idea that they would do that, because I've never seen American crow migrate in like a tight flock, like almost like a blackbird flock. You know what I mean?
Wow. So is that a local movement?
Really
the way that, like, because you know how with American crows, we'll get in the evening and morning time, they'll go from this giant roost area where there might be like 1,000 birds, and they'll kind of fan out for the day. So a few hundred will go like a couple miles in that direction. Is it that, do you think, or what do you think was going on?
I honestly, I don't know. I think it's 50-50. Because I was getting them in ones and twos for the previous few weeks. But then that big push came in, and I was getting flocks of them.
Wow.
And so I don't know if it was like they're coming in for a roost or if they're actually actively migrating. I'm just so unfamiliar with the species. This is a rare species where I'm from, where you're lucky to get one or two at any given time, so
that kind of smacks of a migration, or maybe they're leaving winter mode and starting to spread out and get rid of the flocking behavior so much. That's very interesting. So they're not common in town or in like the urbanized areas of Charlotte.
They are in the breeding season, and until probably like September, October. But I think they clear out and go to the country, or maybe they go further south or something. I honestly don't know.
I'll pull up the map. It's a really interesting distribution, this species. I've always been kind of intrigued by them. You think of them as being coastal, but they actually come inland quite a ways. But they're not really in the Appalachian Mountains. And then you got that central population over here, which supposedly doesn't really do the two-noted vocalization. They do more of the one. Until recently, Will, and you know this, and a lot of our Michigan friends and birders will also know this, but they have recently really just expanded on the north end, and they make these jumps from county to county like this, where there's big areas in Indiana and Illinois with none of them, but then they'll jump up and create a county here, like in New Buffalo, and then now we even have them kind of expanding up the shoreline.
And I'll just add, that's all within the last 20 years. There was not a single record of fish crow in Michigan until 2008 or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then
so only 2 or 3 years ago, they started pushing up into Van Buren County and Allegan County. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that in a single lifetime, you could observe a species doing something as substantial as moving its range hundreds of miles further north, you know?
I mean, it's incredible. And then what are the birds that make the first leaps where they'll jump over 100 miles of habitat and not set up shop and then set that colony up? Or like we've had them out on the dune in Saugatuck there in March, and I had a flock of 5 of them go over, and they were never seen or heard again. Like, were they nesting locally? It seems like they jump up to a new area, and then it may not take, like the colony may not take, and it kind of peters out, and then certain colonies keep going and expand, like the Berrien County ones down here. It's a really interesting species. I also, being a Kent County lister, which is the Grand Rapids, Michigan county right here, of course, the coast gets everything, and we get, very little of the scraps from it. But I think one of these years, I'm really hoping that we can, get one of them over here at the dump or something like that.
Yeah, or following the Grand River all the way up. Let me ask you this. I think certainly with fish crow, it's worth bringing up the climate change aspect to this range expansion. And this is what I always wonder about. We have these narratives about what can cause wild animals to change their behaviors. And I think we have a tendency to assume that species are the same forever. They inhabit the same areas and they live the same way for generations and generations and throughout eons, But even in a stable period where climate isn't changing, how much are these birds going and exploring new areas and having populations snuffed out and then moving into other areas? You know what I mean? Could this be a normal thing, or do you think the less harsh winters are allowing some of those more southern species to start to breed in Michigan?
Boy, that's a big question. That's tough, and it probably varies by species. I mean, clearly many of the species that are expanding, it is because it's becoming milder. There's like a less harsh midwinter freeze, like Carolina wrens. They've gone north into the UP now, but if you get a really, really harsh winter, it can knock them way down, that kind of thing. With fish crow, I don't know. I mean, that animal is for sure tough enough to keep up in that weather, I would think. I don't know anything specifically about their biology, but some of the times you're just witnessing the changes real time, and birds are, changing distribution. That's a thing. That's happening regularly, and sometimes for reasons that you don't even know. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's part of the fun and the mystery of it too, is trying to figure out what is actually driving it.
Yeah.
It's just fun from a birding perspective to be out on the leading edge of it and making those initial discoveries. Because when we first had fish crow at the dune, we were just through the roof. I believe it was the first record for Allegan County, if memory serves.
It must have been. It would have had to been.
And then hilariously, let's see if I can zoom the map in a little bit here. Yeah, so if you zoom in, this is where we are here. This is Allegan County, Michigan. So the birds we had were in the dunes here, and then about a year or two later, because there hadn't been any more sightings, and then one popped up in downtown Saugatuck, like literally in the city streets of the downtown area. And then later, down by the bridge here, so they seem like they may have just set up shop right when we found them, but we just did not know exactly where the spot was, and so we missed them for a couple of years. And then maybe they had some babies, or new colonizers came in, and the numbers just bumped up a little bit. But like, where would we go to see them right now? We don't know where they are right now, but they're probably there, right?
Yeah, it's just, but at any time, if there's only a handful of birds at any time, if they have a bad year breeding, if there's a bad storm that kills all their chicks, at any time that population could get snuffed out. It's just such a what's it, like a luck thing,
Stochastic events, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I use that word a lot in birding. Basically meaning that it may seem like there's a pattern going on, but some of the times it's just like you're flipping a coin over and over, and you hit 10 heads in a row. You know what I mean? So it seems like something happened, but it really didn't. It was just pretty much just normal random noise. One other thing I was going to point out, the birds that have invaded into Cleveland, our good buddy Andy Jones made a discovery about this, at least a decade ago now. The first ones that were in Cleveland were popping up in these neighborhoods. I mean, look at these neighborhoods, dude. This is not big time habitat. They just nest in the big trees in people's yards. And he was like the first sighting for the entire Cleveland area. And maybe it was 15 years ago, but look at the range now. I mean, they're just all over the place. And these ones do the double noted call. So the birds that are invading Ontario and maybe at some point Eastern Michigan are coming from this Atlantic population over here. And the ones over here on Lake Michigan are coming from this population down here. So there's also some really interesting population dynamics taking place. And that's cool.
Really interesting. I didn't know that. Yeah, that is really neat.
So enough about crows. What the heck else is going on in birding right now?
Yeah, well, you guys had a fun week with a certain barnacle goose.
Yes, we did. Folks will probably have already seen the video that I created while in the field. But in a nutshell, what happened is we were out birding the dune the same day that the migration, or we were expecting migration to take place, and it really didn't. And as we were leaving the dune, about 10 in the morning, we got that posting that a DNR employee had photographed a barnacle goose right down by the state game area there along the riverside, Kalamazoo Riverside, and we just raced down, and sure enough, the thing was sitting right there. It took a little bit of searching, but these are some photos of the exact bird in question. And
it is such a cool looking bird. If you're listening and not watching, it's like a Canada goose, but half sized, like frosty white edges to the scapulars and coverts.
Yeah.
And then just a totally white face, like you caked a Canada goose in snow, or like vanilla ice cream or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a tiny bird. I mean, the beak is compared to a Canada goose, this thing is minute. It is like the size of a mallard, basically. And like I totally agree with you. The intricacy of the patterning on the upper parts, like here's a good example. There's so much little intricate striping and stuff, and then the kind of neat black breast patch is a real stunner. And as always, the question is like, is this a wild bird, or like all the previous ones that we've had reported in Michigan, was it a potential aviary release or zoo, captive bird that got out with the bands, or sometimes the waterfowl have like a colored band on the tarsus, or like a wing tag, or the wings are clipped or pinioned, all those kinds of things. And dude, this bird has none of those signs. This thing, can we prove it's wild? No, but there's no sign of anything. It's behaving normally. It showed, the biggest thing I would say is it showed up at the exact time of year when geese are making that first giant push, the greater white-fronted and cackling geese in particular. That was literally like within a 48-hour period of the first giant push of those, and that's who these ones migrate with when they're coming from Greenland. So I think we have a pretty good case that this might be a wild bird.
I wonder where this bird, if it is wild, I wonder where it spent the winter.
Oh, that's always the question, isn't it?
And what suckers weren't checking their white-fronted geese close enough.
And it's probably, I'll have to own that it could well be me that's the sucker in this scenario.
Yeah, right.
My motivation this winter was low. I'm not going to lie. It was really hard, and there was so few birds out there.
Interestingly, one of my very few Michigan lifers last year was Brant. And this bird was in Ionia County, and it was hanging out exclusively with Canada geese in cornfields, which I guess I don't know the history of Brant in Michigan so much, but I always think of Brant as birds that you get actively migrating on either Lake Erie or Lake Huron, maybe Lake Michigan if you're lucky. Yeah. But I don't think of them as like the cackling goose, white-fronted goose, Canada goose, corn stubble foraging birds. You know
totally
what I mean?
Agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm going to pull up the Brant map as we're talking this through here. So this is one of the coolest parts of eBird. These darker purple cells is where the frequency of the bird being detected is higher than normal. And a lot of the times when you put the data from a huge geographical area together like this, even though it's haphazardly collected, take a look. See how there's this path from James Bay and it goes southeast or even maybe a little bit south-southeast to the Atlantic coast. And then they're kind of numerous all through here, New York, New Jersey. That is legit. That is exactly what they do. So if you want to see them on the Great Lakes, Lake Ontario is your place. And they do not generally, as far as I know, associate with the Canada geese so much. So if you're going to get it in Michigan, a lot of the time it'll be flying down Lake Huron like this late in the fall. Mine, in fact, funneled right down the river and was sitting in the park in downtown Detroit. So
pull up a picture of that bird from near Lansing. I think it was seen at a few places.
So you chased this bird. This is near Michigan State's campus, right?
Yeah, but it moved around a little bit. So when I saw it, it was like a quarter-mile away in a blizzard. And I was like, well, that's a little tiny dark goose. That must be it. You know what I mean? So my looks were terrible. I'm glad I've seen him on the West Coast now because that was not as good. I
would say that this bird probably, it doesn't really have anybody else other than Canada geese to hang out with. But I don't think people from the East Coast and West Coast might want to correct me, but I tend to see flocks of brant kind of by themselves, near the ocean. So I bet you this bird just had nothing better to do. I also got, let's see, there's two records I want to mention to you. One of them back in the 80s was doing this at Muskegon Wastewater. And it always confused me because that's a site that'll have like thousands and thousands of Canada geese, but not normally too many of the smaller ones. And it was apparently mixed in with the Canadas. So I always thought that was odd. And then what was the other one? Kent County has one record, lowly Kent County, at Reed's Lake from the 1970s. And it was in October doing the same thing. It was in a small group of Canadas just like this. So, it obviously happens. It's really rare to get one of these things inland like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really handsome little bird too, aren't they?
Yeah, they're one of my favorite. I think when I was back doing lots of TikToks, I did a video ranking all the geese of North America, and I actually didn't include barnacle goose in that one. I probably should have, but Brant took the cake. Brant won for the North American geese.
So do you have any plans to get out this week? We are about to get a warm front. As I understand it, by Monday or Tuesday, it's going to go over 50 degrees, which is a big deal up here. It's been a brutal winter, and we will definitely be out on the dune if we get a south wind and 50 degrees right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're going to have a 70-degree day and sunny on Saturday. And Beck and I were talking about going to a zoo that's kind of, I don't know, I guess famous around here. And I'm just excited to get out of town and see what kind of birds are moving out in the countryside. Because I don't know if anybody listening is familiar with Charlotte, but it's all city and suburbs and highways and kind of small parks. So I don't really get flocks of geese flying over. Cranes are really rare. I think I'm probably going to struggle to get like broad-winged hawk in the spring. So I'm excited to explore a little bit in the countryside.
Yeah, I've driven through Charlotte once or twice, and that's what I remember too. Is kind of suburbia. That'll be very interesting. Is there any relief, like mountain, mountain tops or ridges or anything like that you could get a really good view from, or maybe attract stuff with some thermals or some updrafts?
Yeah, within about a 45-minute drive. There's a few different places that I'm definitely going to hit once the raptors start migrating. And that really could be any day now with like red-tailed hawks and eagles and osprey. I'm sure they're already moving. For me, I just want to play my cards right in terms of hitting it when the density of migrating birds is the highest, because one of the most frustrating things is where you're kind of planning this trip and excited for it, and you get out there at dawn and then nothing happens. You're like, well, I could have slept in and had the same experience,
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, that's about what happened to us the other day. By about 9 in the morning, you're going, yeah, this is not going to be happening today.
What I'm excited to do is I need to hit Cape Hatteras during migration and see Jaegers and shearwaters and storm petrels. I have not done like a proper sea watch from there yet.
Dude, I've done a couple of them, but it was a long time ago. That would be awesome to get out there with Brian Pattison again. And it's because the continental shelf here is so close that you can get out. I think you can get out there in like an hour or two, and then all the birds are in the deep water, or most of them are anyway. Yeah, I'm down to come join you on that if you're thinking of doing it this year. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, I will say I went and did a pelagic with Brian Pattison and Kate Sutherland last summer, and the night before, Woody Goss and I were sea watching from the point there, just like at dusk, and we didn't really see much. We had a gannet in the distance and some Corey's shearwaters.
Yeah.
And just as we were packing up, we had our tripods on our shoulder, and we were walking down the beach, and I looked to the right, and there's a Wilson storm petrel 10 feet off the beach, just right in the surf, kind of pattering around.
Wow.
Like, wait, that's like the best bird of the best bird of the day right after you pack up. So
what in the world is that doing so close to shore? That's got to be really vulnerable there, I would think.
Yeah, you'd think so, because they're really not very common until you get off the continental shelf. Then they're everywhere.
But that was my memory, is you wouldn't see them near shore at all. You'd have to get way out there. But that's the other cool thing about these pelagic trips is there's a added element of never knowing what you're going to get on those, because seabirds are such long distance, easy flyers. Like anything can show up at any time. They have had stuff from like the Indian Ocean, like Swinno's storm petrel, and just so yeah. There's always that element of just total surprise. Like you could get like a southern albatross or something, like yellow nose or black-browed albatross, from the South Atlantic or whatever.
Caleb, insane pelagic birding records might be a good topic for next week. What do you think?
I like it, and in fact, I can contribute a few records myself, and I'll save it for then.
There you go.
Now we'll have a little teaser for folks.
All right.
Any parting words, man?
Other than keep your head on a swivel, keep it up, and find some birds, because they are coming. We are officially at the beginning of spring migration. I can't wait, man.
I can't wait. It has been such a long time coming this winter. And another teaser. I'm going to Texas soon, and we might have to do a piece or two piggybacking on that. So not only will we be getting some nice migrants and warmer weather here, we'll also be seeing some things that we don't normally see. So that ought to be a lot of fun.
Sweet.
Good chatting, man. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Like, subscribe, follow. And if you have suggestions for what you'd like to hear us talk about in future weeks, please put that stuff in the comments. And we look forward to the next one. Peace.
Bird on.